Hello everyone, I'm Mike Connors, and welcome to How It Ticks, the go-to podcast for anyone with a spark of curiosity about the inner workings of Switzerland. Hosted by yours truly, an Australian expat with a deep curiosity, How It Ticks offers a platform where listeners are invited to explore the vast landscape of Swiss culture, business, innovation, and tradition. Each episode features a one-on-one interview with experts and thought leaders from various fields, providing a panoramic view of what makes Switzerland tick. If you are like me and you enjoy listening to successful people share their insights, this podcast is for you. In this episode, I sit down with Michael Grampp, the Chief Economist and Head of Research at Deloitte Switzerland. Michael brings a wealth of knowledge and provides invaluable insights into the key trends shaping Switzerland's economy and workforce. We start the conversation by diving into the transformative role of AI, particularly generative AI, and its impact on businesses and industries. Michael provides practical examples of how traditional companies are integrating AI into their operations and the challenges they encounter. We also discuss that whilst Gen AI can produce remarkable content almost instantaneously, Michael highlights a critical point. If users don't have a clear understanding of what good quality looks like, the content produced will fall short, making fact-checking and quality assurance more vital than ever. From there, we transition to the workforce, discussing how AI is influencing jobs and the skills in demand. Michael explains the pros and cons of Switzerland's reliance on a large percentage of expats and immigrants in its workforce. Whilst being a country which attracts talent from all over the world has its benefits, it also has its drawbacks, such as a housing crisis, which is something we talk about. We then switch gears to talk more broad economic challenges, including the risk of energy shortages driven by rapid population growth and what this could mean for the Swiss economy. To wrap up, Michael provides advice for job seekers and professionals, focusing on how to make themselves as attractive as possible in an evolving market shaped by technology and global trends. This episode is packed with insights into the future of AI, jobs, and Switzerland's economic landscape. Enjoy. Michael, welcome to How It Ticks. How are you doing?
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the invitation, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
You are the Chief Economist at Deloitte. What does the Chief Economist's day look like on average?
Well, that's a good question. It has various elements. I think, what is important for being the chief economist is you need to stay informed. And obviously, kind of daily routine is that I consume a wide variety of information sources. So newspapers, magazines, radio, podcasts, videos, social media. And, because I need a broad perspective, so I'm not now a specialist on AI only or anything like that. So I have to listen to and read a lot about. And what is really important is that I also step out of my echo chamber, ensure that I'm really, I'm both informed and also connected a little bit to current economic reality. So I think that's one very important part of my daily routine. Then engaging with key stakeholders is important. So regular speaking, either with our clients or with government officials, other external experts, to gain also real world perspectives, I would say, and understand new trends that you hear now from others as well. And also connecting with internal colleagues, something I do when I'm in the office more frequently than when I'm at home. And then creating content, that's then usually when I work from home, work on studies, opinion papers, or producing my own podcast, as you know.
You said that one of the ways you get informed is you speak to some of your clients. What does that look like? You just every so often hit them up and go, hey, can we catch up? I'm curious to know what you're thinking about.
Yeah, it's really push and pull, I would say. So, when we publish some research on specific topics, often they approach us to want to understand a little bit more about that and want to have a discussion. If there are crises, I usually, as a chief economist, I'm high on demand. So I think inflation was for me actually a good time, not for anyone else. But I mean, I had so many meetings and were giving presentations and conferences and so around inflation, for example. I'm then asked, that's when people come to me, approach me and ask for that. And then I have, of course, when I work on specific projects and topics with my team, we search for experts outside of Deloitte, because it should never be just a Deloitte opinion or point of view that we produce. We speak with people from the business and so on, and reach out to do expert interviews ourselves. So where we then and I interview others in order to exchange ideas and opinions.
Is whenever you do some of these talks, are you always representing Deloitte? Like when you go and speak about at a conference about about inflation, are you talking as Michael, or are you talking as Deloitte?
No, I'm talking here completely always as Deloitte, no? Because that's my role. So it's not my private personal role. Then I'm engaged in other topics like football or anything like that. So it's really, I'm the representative of Deloitte Switzerland in this context for those topics, also when I speak at conferences and so on, or taking part in panel discussions.
It seems a little bit like your job is not that different from a journalist producing content. I had, like a few weeks ago, I had a journalist from Bloomberg on here, and when I asked him about what his day looks like, it actually sounded pretty similar to what you just said in terms of gathering information, speaking to people, constantly keeping up with all these different media. And then, but I guess when you're releasing information, you're releasing it from Deloitte. What's the process to actually going from reading information to producing information?
Yeah, I think the comparison with job of a journalist is correct. That's right. So I think a similar job description. However, we are not under the same time pressure. I mean, someone at Bloomberg's, there a news or a story happens and he has to produce something in 4 hours. That's not something we have to do. So we have a little bit the luxury to have more time, and that means automatically there are more checks to cross and to pass in order to publish something. I think it's the usual whenever something gets out of a company, and doesn't matter if this is now a consulting firm or a car manufacturer, anything like else, there are some security checks, there is reputational risk checks, but it's not so bad actually. So when we write a report, at the end, we need 1 or 2 people who do these checks. They go over that. Usually when it's something for the media, our media people go over that. But I had never, ever in my over 10 years with Deloitte a case where something was refused. So maybe changed a little bit the wording or anything like that. But overall, we are in a lucky position that we are quite independent and can publish more or less what we want. But obviously we have more. That's again now the difference to a journalist. We have more the corporate view, because we focus on topics that are of interest for the corporate sector, and very often with challenges where we come up with ideas for solutions and identify opportunities basically in various areas. It's now AI or it's an industry study or anything like that.
Given that organizations are going to take the content that you produce as input to their decision making, do you feel a strong sense of responsibility with this content?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our insights, our analysis, and opinions can influence important decisions for businesses. And with this influence comes also responsibility to ensure that our analysis is accurate, that we use the right and credible data, and our view is balanced and clear. I think people who read our stuff, clients, want to have and see an opinion. So it's important to have an opinion, but it should be balanced, of course, and quite clear. And well, I think an important skill in our job is being fact checker, basically, again, like a journalist. And I mean, if you do this right, then hardly anything can go wrong, basically, But obviously, there is a responsibility in what you publish, that it's correct, that you rely on the right data and so on.
Do you ever, in your insights, make predictions?
No, we do not. We don't have economic forecasts. So if you're thinking about economic forecasts, we are not doing that. That was a strategic decision a couple of years ago because in Switzerland there are so many institutions, banks, government agencies who are doing forecasting, and we decided there's no need that we are number 11 or 12 in the market and I stand then in front of the camera and say, okay, next year Switzerland will grow by 2.3%. And 3 months later, I can stand in front of the same camera and say why I was wrong. So we decided not to do complex economic modeling and forecasting because that's also resource intensive. You need 2-3 people in order to do that. And there are good forecasters on the market. So we use consensus forecasts and use that as a basis for our analysis. But then, of course, with predictions, when it comes more to business topics. So let's say as a couple of 4 or 5 years ago, during the pandemic, the whole home office trend started. We, of course, came up with prediction where we believe how the whole things will develop also with other business topics. And when it comes again to economic predictions, not GDP forecasting with models, but obviously we are collecting the data and we have an opinion about, I don't know, inflation will go down or up, interest rate might go up and down, but it's not based on complex mathematical modeling.
Talking about business predictions, do you have any predictions offhand that you can share about AI and where that's going?
Yeah, I think AI is an interesting case. So, I mean, some say it's a completely hype. Some say, no, it's not the opposite. I think like usually, I think the truth lies in the middle. I think we have seen a big hype and euphoric expectations. I think that was a little bit too much. It will have a big impact, but it will take much longer than we thought 2 years ago. And that's something what I hear from many in the market as well. But it will have an impact. And you know, it depends a lot on, let's say, which area a company is working for, is acting in which industry, the job profile, it depends a lot. So, I mean, what we see at the moment are large organizations, for example, integrating AI into operations, focusing on automating routine tasks or enhancing data analysis, improving customer services. That's already ongoing, but it takes a little bit longer than expected to see the benefits. And but still, many companies are finding that full AI integration is a complex thing and will take longer than anticipated. So it will come. It will have an impact, like we've seen from other big technology shifts, like the introduction of the internet or anything like that. But it won't come as quickly as we thought 2 years ago.
Do you have any idea at how specifically companies will be? I guess when I'm thinking AI, I'm thinking Gen AI now, because that's the hype of the last 18 months.
At the moment, everyone is thinking about Gen AI.
For sure. And besides employees getting ChatGPT to write their emails and project plans, do you see any other developments in terms of how companies are using it well?
Yeah, I think you see many examples, and also within Deloitte. I mean, a very good example is everything that is connected with creating visuals or videos. I mean, there are amazing things happen. So, I mean, let's say you create a visual for a report. What took 3 years ago a week takes now 4 hours or something like that. And that's not exaggerated, really. So I think with those new tools, you can do a lot. So, I mean, in the creative space, you see many advancements. And by the way, that does not necessarily mean that we need less people. So, I mean, our team size is still the same, but we can do much more cooler things, quicker things, more things. So, I mean, it's always a resource issue in companies like ours to have creative teams. Everyone would like to have more creative stuff, but they're completely busy the whole time, and now they can do twice as much. It's the same amount of input. And that's something we should not forget. And we see this also in other areas.
I remember a conversation between Lex Friedman and Sam Altman, and they were talking about what happens when ChatGPT can write 90% of a developer's code. And they said, is it going to replace 9 out of 10 developers? They said, no, that is going to produce 10 times more code. That's like...
Yeah, correct. It will have then other problems. Let's stay with a little bit my area, content creation. I mean, we are also using in certain degrees those tools, and let's imagine you can create 5 times more content, and everyone can create 5 times more content. Then you face other issues. So I mean, who is going to read or consume this content if you have more and more content? That's a little bit the one issue, and the other issue is the quality thing. So I mean, I love ChatGPT, but I also know the limitations when it comes to creating content and writing. And it's basically one of, as I mentioned, fact checking. It's an important part of my job, and this is getting even more important when you're using AI. And also, let's say you ask ChatGPT, or ChatGPT helps you in writing a piece of content. It can do only part of it, to be honest. But I mean, still, you must, as a user, you must be able to know how a good piece of content looks like. If you have not learned that, and you just rely on ChatGPT, forget it. That's a little bit the danger, that the quality of output, and the more we see of this AI-created output, the quality goes down. I think that's more the challenge, and not necessarily that we might all lose our jobs.
You almost need to put people through a few years of boot camp, have it restricted before allowing them.
Correct. That's why I'm very critical. I see it with my 2 kids, 14 and 11, especially the older one. They're using ChatGPT when they're using it at schools. I'm against that, to be honest, because exactly of that reason. You can talk with them, be responsible, use it only for this or that, but no, they use it then to write the whole essay. They have no clue what they've written, basically, and will never learn how to write it. And if you have the teachers who have even less clue about that and who don't know that, then the disaster is written on the wall. What will happen with this generation?
Yeah, my brother's in university at the moment, and he's studying engineering, and when he gets a problem, a maths problem, he can just take a screenshot of it and upload it and go, solve this problem for me. And he said, it's amazing. I said, yeah, you might finish university, but you won't be an engineer at the end because you won't know anything.
Yeah. Now the AI enthusiasts say, well, in the future you don't need to know that. The machine knows it. Not so sure about it. But what is really good, coming back to my kids, is it's much easier for me to help them with when they learn, for example, because ChatGPT is the perfect teacher. So I mean, and my kids also say, well, ChatGPT explains it much better than my teacher did. So that's of course amazing, no? But still, you have really to learn it first. You know how good content looks like. So that's why I'm not worried that people like us ever go out of the job market, because quality review, fact checking will get even more important. So experience will be a very important asset.
Coming back to sort of this Swiss economy, when you have these big Swiss institutions, most of which extremely sensitive with their data, do you think it can really help them, given that to be properly useful, you got to train it on the data which the company has?
I'm a little bit too far away now to know exactly what the banks, for example, are doing. So I mean, that's an example that you think. I think yes, it can, but as we know, I mean, data must be stored within Switzerland and all of the requirements. It might have limiting effects then on quality, but I'm not close enough to the topic that I can really judge that. But I know that the large AI providers are, of course, working on solutions for, let's say, companies with very data sensitive content, where they cannot just upload everything to the cloud and you don't know where it is. No? I mean, you see it even in the large corporations with ChatGPT, for example, where it's quite limitations on it, and they build their own Gen AI models because of that reason. But often the quality is not exactly the same. That's correct.
Do you think, looking at trends and possibly making a prediction, do you think that this has a big enough impact on the demand for jobs that it will change the job market? Do you think ultimately people's skills need to change for this, or it's just, it's no different to learning how to write an email? Ultimately, it just gets built into what people are already doing.
No, I think it will have, of course, an impact like all technology changes have. I think that's something you will see then also, let's say, has an impact in the job market regarding skills. But that's a constant topic anyway. I mean, you have, it's constant learning, you have upskilling. You need to be in front of those new developments. And, there's this famous quote, it's not from me, of course, from someone else at the beginning of the whole hype, who said, okay, you will never lose your job because of AI, but you will lose the job if you don't know how to use Gen AI. And I think that describes it quite well. So I think self-responsibility, continuous learning is still important with AI or without AI, and develop in-demand digital and technical skills now. And that's now AI, for example. And in 3 years' time, it's something else.
Besides the technical skills, what are the other sort of most valuable skills which you think will be valuable in the next sort of 5 years?
I think it comes down to the classical skills you need in a job, and really I don't think a lot have changed. Of course, you have the tech changes and so on, but I mean, what I've seen a difference in the last years, getting more and more important, is a skill that to build your own personal brand is something very, very interesting. So I did 3 years ago a 6 months training course on that topic, and that's something you experience through the spread of social media. So build up your personal brand is getting more and more important. So do not rely only on your position in your firm, for example, but build up your own personal brand. Establish yourself as an expert in your field, and also by sharing your insights, writing articles, producing content, engaging in your professional communities, and so on. I think soft skills, nothing new, I know, but I mean strengthening of soft skills, building and leverage the network, working internationally. I mean, the more we have remote working as a part, and the more and more jobs might go offshore and you work more in collaborative teams, it's important that you know how to do that. I think what was a good experience for many of us during the pandemic, suddenly we were sitting in the home office. For many of us, it was the first time. And there suddenly everyone realized, okay, it's not exactly the same. You have to adapt to that. And I know people who did this very good, and other ones not so much. No? So that was also a new skill you have to develop, that you are able to work 2 days per week alone in your home office, for example.
Speaking of home office, have you looked into any trends or had any thoughts on what are the sort of longer term trends of home office, given where we are now? Like I saw, it must have been a month ago or maybe 2 months ago, there was this uproar because Google is making everybody come back 3 days a week mandatory in the office, and Google is, given they're the most famous company in the world to having the most luxurious work life, they still had to mandate office days. So it's interesting. Yeah. Do you think that's coming back?
Well, I think Google was an extreme case at the beginning already. And now they're moving back to hybrid, basically, 2 or 3 days or so. Exactly that model that I see at most of the companies. And I think that's the model we will see in the future as well. So I think home office is here to stay. Some decided, okay, let's send everyone home and we don't need an office anymore. Some realized now, okay, that was maybe not ideal, and asked them to come back, like Google. I think remote work has proven to be effective, and I think many companies, still see many companies are really committed to supporting it long term, and flexibility has become the more, let's say, a core expectation for many employees now. But it depends a lot on the role as well. No?
Of course.
I think IT and data roles, software development, that you can do easily perform remotely, and not a surprise, it's very often gets offshore. If you have more sales and client-facing roles, I mean, there you have more an hybrid approach. So in-person interaction, relationship building, I think something we realized during the pandemic is, it's a difference. So to sell a 10 million project on Teams is not the same like try to sell a 10 million project when you sit in the same room. And then you have all the creative and collaborative tasks where it's really better if you meet at least once or twice per week in the office in sessions and to act a little bit or get a little bit more creative. So I think it's here to stay, and I think the hybrid model that we see with most of the companies, I think that's form of the future. But don't forget, we have still 50% of jobs in Switzerland and in many other countries cannot work from home. So I think that's a challenge we see in some companies where they have, let's say, still a manufacturing base, for example, and they need to come to the office, and then you have the back office and they stay at home. That's a little bit a political decision then as well. For them, you always very often have to say, okay, our admin or back office people also need to be more frequently in the office. Otherwise, this is creating frictions among the whole thing. If you have now only a service company where everyone just works in the office, it's much easier. But again, every second person cannot work from home because someone has to drive the tram, someone has to bake your bread, and so on. No? Don't forget that.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk was a good example of someone very vocal about it not being fair if half the company has to come in, the other half doesn't.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yes, people producing the Teslas, and then you have the management guys. So then it's getting tricky. Yeah.
In terms of the job market specifically, do you see much of a difference between the Swiss job market compared to other European cities in terms of what is required?
Yeah, I think what we've seen in the last 20 years actually is really that the Swiss job market is quite different to other, let's say, European countries. I think it's because we have quite a robust economy. With one of Europe's strongest economies, we are very stable. I mean, COVID, again, a good example. I mean, we still had high employment rates, labor market participation is high. We hardly had any inflation, not a big recession during COVID. And this resilience attracts a lot of talent and supports also job growth. Then we have one of the most flexible labor markets, so no comparison with Germany or France, for example, or even Italy. Highly flexible, labor market law that allow for quick adaptation to economic change. And this flexibility supports then also both employers and then the employees as well, especially when you have disruption going on. So it's much easier than for the whole economy to change. We have quite high migration of a skilled workforce. That's also something you do not see in many other countries. But we rely as well heavily on skilled international workers, especially in sectors like pharma, finance, IT, and so on. But at the same time, also on, let's say, a lower educational level, we need people from abroad, healthcare sector, infrastructure, and so on. That fills the gaps in the labor market, but there's also downside to that, of course. No?
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, when you have a large number of expats, skilled workers coming here to work, the benefits seem relatively obvious, but what are the economic challenges that get created from that as well?
Yeah, it's a good point. So I see a couple of challenges. I think the most obvious one for everyone that comes to Switzerland, it's always the same. It's housing. Housing and infrastructure strain. So you see that let's say the influx of skilled workers and expats increases demand for housing, that drive up prices, creating pressure on infrastructure, especially in the big cities. But driving up prices, not forget, the reason for that is the big obstacle is really the tight regulation, and in my opinion, also the wrong regulation. Supply and demand does not match, and that's because the supply is not on the same level like the demand. And with a lower regulation, Zurich is a very good example. I mean, there are not many companies now left that would like to build something in Zurich because of the regulation and all the things you have to go through. This is definitely an imbalance. And the same applies for infrastructure. I mean, the population has grown significantly over the last 20 years, but infrastructure expansion has not kept pace. So electricity-wise, for example, not. Road-wise, motorways. I mean, we have soon the upcoming referendum about to build more streets, more motorways, but it's still open, the outcome. So I think that's the obvious, let's say, challenge or negative side. In growth is also important to mention. I mean, we are increasingly seeing more a broad-based economic growth. I mean, if you look at the per capita growth rates in recent years, they have been only half about the overall growth rate. So you can even say for last year, we haven't grown at all. If you look at the per capita growth, that's many people don't look at those numbers actually. So it's to a certain degree a little bit like perpetual motion. So I mean, the shortage of skilled workers, many believe, can be solved by high immigration, how we did this in the past, but this is getting more and more difficult, and it creates challenges and side effects, and that leads to more labor shortage. So, for example, when you have a high-skilled professional coming to Switzerland with their families, the demand for labor in associated sectors like childcare, healthcare, infrastructure increases as well. And this can then actually does increase the pressure on the labor market in those sections. So, I mean, we are talking for over 20 years now about labor shortage, but it's never over. So it's really a question we as a country have to ask, do we want to continue with this economic model or not? I think when I look around it here, people are getting more critical around that, and I'm not sure if we continue like that. And another thing is, due to the demographic change, it will get even from year to year more difficult to attract those talent coming to Switzerland, because in the other countries they have also labor shortage. And in Europe, we are getting less and less people really active in the workforce because more older people exit the job market than entering.
What's the alternative to, okay, if we say, you know what, this migration, it's too much, we need to slow down because we can no longer sustain the amount of infrastructure. What's the alternative?
Well, you have to compensate that. Quite simple. Okay, let's focus on the workforce now. You have a certain demand for it, and estimations go. I think there was recently a study done by Demographica, I believe. Estimate around, I think, a gap of 400,000 people in the next 10 years. So if you cannot attract enough talent, or if you do not want to attract more talent coming to Switzerland, you have to look at the potential in the country. I mean, first of all, what would be necessary is to increase the pension age, of course. No? We are now with 65. We have one of the lowest in whole Europe. So in other countries, you have 67. In many countries, in Portugal, Scandinavian ones, it's very often linked to the age expectancy and things like that. So, but we are still at 65. So I think there's no way around to increase that, because that would help at least. keeping people longer in the workforce. Another thing is still women. I think there's working women still potential there, or non-working women still a potential there. We have globally quite a high participation rate of women in the workforce, which is good, so a very high one. However, they work very small pensum. So, I mean, many work only part-time, 40%, 50%, 60%. And that's something where I see potential as well. I know not easy to solve because there are reasons why they don't work 100%, and you have tax reasons, you have childcare, it's not easy and expensive. I know that, but I mean, that's something you can do. And then I think the biggest chance is in automation. Technology, automation. Just look at countries like Japan, Taiwan, South Korea. They are 20 years ahead in this development of us. Japan, shrinking population, but still managing growth. And a couple of reasons, there are people working until 70. For example, women are getting now more and more into the labor market, but one of the main reasons was really that they invested heavily already years ago in automation, even in healthcare and in the care sector. So I think we have to do more on that side to compensate that.
How does that look? Because Switzerland's famously behind the times when it comes to technology in general. I mean, when I open a bank account, I still get 5 separate letters in 5 different days.
But still better than in the UK, or not, when you open a bank account there, or have they improved?
I'm Australian, and I like to think we are a little bit further ahead, but still, there's a long way to go. But I guess my point is, these things, like you said, if it's 20 years worth of hard commitment, like from where we are to where Japan is in the time frame we seem to have a solution in place, it seems like a pretty big ask.
Yeah, it is. You're completely right. I mean, a lot, and that's not an ask mainly for the government. So I think it's for the corporate sector. But I mean, in the last 10, 20 years, it was very often the easier way for companies to hire cheaper labor from abroad than investing in technology. But this has to change. But I think the pressure is now on skills, talent shortage, and so on, that this will happen now. And you can do then a lot also in a short period of time. I mean, you apply, of course, the latest technology and not the one that was 20 years ago, the latest one. So, but of course, we have to start with that and doing it more and more now.
Do you know what the percentage of the workforce in Switzerland is Swiss versus international, or expat, or not a Swiss citizen?
I don't know the workforce exactly, but we have around 25% foreigners here. I expect that it's a little bit similar than in the workforce. But what I did know, because we have done recently a demographic analysis, and that unfortunately confirms the dilemma we are getting more into, that regarding demographic changes, that the birth rate, we looked at the birth rates of Swiss nationals and those that do not have a Swiss passport in Switzerland, and both goes down dramatically. The birth rate of, let's say, the foreigners here is still a little bit higher, 0.3 point higher, I think, but it goes down dramatically as well. So, you have this reproduction rate, it is called 2.1. And we are far below. I think Swiss nationals around 1.3, and the international ones 1.6. But both goes down like that. So the people we hire from abroad come from countries that face exactly the same demographic problems. To summarize it, so birth rate, demographic change is either development of the birth rate. And then at the same time, when you look at the job market, how many people are entering the job market, and that's very easy to forecast, because I mean, those that are born today will enter in 16 or 18 years the job market, and there's already a big gap. So the direction we're heading is quite clear. Solution is, of course, not so easy, and because every country in Europe is facing exactly the same issue on different level.
It appears to me, just as someone in the workforce myself, that there is an increase in hiring remote work by gig companies. Is that is that true, or is that seeming to be the case for me?
What I think is, I mean, it always has been like that. No, I don't think it's anything new. I think we always offshored work. So it's a long-standing practice, hiring remote workers abroad, offshoring. You always had those trends. I remember some years ago, a lot of HR functions went suddenly abroad to Poland. But then a couple of years later back, now back, and now it's fine. And so anything like that. So I think it's nothing new. But I think it has a limited impact on the domestic labor market, to be honest, because despite the trend that you might see, there has been no significant negative effect on Swiss residents' job opportunities. I think we still have a shortage in many areas and still a strong economy, high demand for specialized skilled roles has continued to support the local employment. No?
I mean, it's pretty almost invaluable to speak French or Swiss German, which I guess is still difficult to find if you have so much competition from expats and international people. At least there is that, which is always going to be the advantage of locals.
Yes, I think that's also something, because we do not speak or do not have English as a local language. The risk is also more limited. I sometimes look also when I have a project where I don't have enough resources to look for externals who can support us. But the biggest challenge is always the language barrier. No? Try to find someone. Let's say you have to analyze data for Swiss companies. Find someone in India who can read annual reports that are available only in German, for example. It's nearly impossible. AI might help now, of course. No? So, you don't need individuals anymore to do that. And the rise of AI and the ongoing cost pressure might shift more hiring abroad. Yes, that's right. But at the same time, then we have also the decline in the workforce over the coming years and decades. So it might come at the right time as well. No? We don't have enough people anyway. So
how does the profile of the average job seeker look now? I understand that one of the key reasons it's so difficult to find people is, I suppose, there are less people now because, as you said, there's an aging population and therefore less people on the job market. But is it also more difficult to find people now, or is that also a bit of an illusion? It's always been this way.
Yeah, good question. I have now really just the experience in my area or where I support other areas in finding people. It's still, I think, end of the day, I think you're right. It has not changed a lot in the last 10 or 15 years. It was difficult 15 years ago. It's difficult now. We have sometimes waves. So sometimes for some job offers, you get suddenly 50 people, and then 2 years later for something similar, only 5. I don't know why that's the case, but it happens quite frequently. So there are up and downs. But again, as I mentioned earlier, so we are talking about skill shortages for years. We are growing and growing, and we still have them.
Yeah, you have access to a pool of candidates all over the world. You now have these online tools which make it more easy to find talent than ever, and yet it does not seem to have solved the problem of being able to find the right people.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm not an HR expert and don't work in HR, but I think you're right that you can increase the number of applications maybe, but this does not necessarily need you find more people with the right skill set. But I think also that companies, so that's what I hear from others as well and from HR experts, are not flexible enough as well in order what they're looking for. They're still looking for the perfect fit. But they have to change because that's not possible anymore. And sometimes it's even better to get someone with a maybe different experience from a different industry or different skill set, even if it does not fit 100% the description that you're looking for.
Yeah, I wonder if it's both. It's the expectation of the employer trying to find the perfect candidate, and then also the expectation of the candidate trying to find the perfect job. And together, there's just never that perfect. That alignment is harder than ever.
Yeah, it's correct. And especially, I mean, it's a different story if you apply for a job when you already have one at the moment. Then you're more critical and look exactly that you find something that suits you much better. If you are on the job market and month by month, I think you're getting more flexible what you accept.
It's probably a bit like dating. Now that there is the
Yeah.
illusion of an infinite amount of people to choose from, you become incredibly picky, which maybe that wasn't the case and makes things ultimately worse than before you had an app to find everything.
Yeah. And it's a demand market at the moment. So, I mean, there's not enough demand there, and therefore the demand side. So those that are looking for a job can also dictate to a certain degree what they want to have now. That's why you have so many in the last years, all these additional benefits that every company tries to attract now talent, no? Which you haven't seen 15
What do you mean
years
by
ago.
demand job? Demand market?
No, it's more a demand-driven market, or a demand-driven market. So, I mean, there is not enough. Sorry. I have to correct it. I mean, supply, of course. No? So, I mean, there's not enough supply. So not enough candidates there, and more companies are looking for someone. So the supply side, so those that are looking for a job can dictate more or less what they are looking for, what they want to have. And that's why many corporations over the last year added so many additional benefits to the packages to get more and more attractive.
I wanted to ask you a bit more now on the sort of broader economic perspective. How does the strong Swiss franc fit into this? With my minimum macroeconomic knowledge, does not seem to be slowing down. What economic drawbacks does that have?
I think, I mean, we are used to a strong currency for many years. I mean, if you go back the last decades, the Swiss franc has always, I think the last 30, 40 years, on average, 2 to 3% every year. And I think that helped us a lot in order to stay competitive, first of all. And you can really compare that to other countries like Germany, who have gone the other way because of the euro. I mean, that German Deutschmark was also a very strong currency, the same like the Swiss franc, up to the year where they introduced the euro, and then it got a weak currency, and basically Germany step by step lost their competitiveness, basically. So it's like a fitness program when you have a currency that is getting stronger and stronger. A problem is if you have suddenly economic shocks, and like a couple of years ago, where suddenly the Swiss franc went from 120 to 1 within a short period of time, then it's getting a problem for the industry. No? But slightly increase in strength is really not a big problem. So I don't see that. And at the same time, it attracts more people to Switzerland as well, I would say, because for us as a consumer, we are getting richer by that, because every time we go abroad, things are getting cheaper more or less fast. No?
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And that's obviously great. And correct. I mean, but what I always say to my friends who say, you're also rich in Switzerland. No, I'm not rich in Switzerland. I'm only rich when I'm abroad.
Yeah. Definitely.
Because what many don't realize, of course, that obviously, and that the price level here is much higher than compared to foreign countries.
Yeah, 6 franc for a cup of coffee still gets me.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so
I mean, Australia has similar issues at the moment. No? I mean, due to the inflation, I mean, incredibly expensive.
It's expensive for an Australian. Again, the exchange rate's working in my favor, very much so, but not for my family when they come and visit.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the Franc continues to steadily increase. We assume, at least imminently, there is no negative consequences of that. Are there any other significant economic challenges which you think Switzerland faces in the short term, or could face, I should say?
Yeah, let's say not just short term, also medium term. So talent shortage and demographic change, I already explained. We have the strong Swiss franc. I think also energy costs is something we have to look out for. Fortunately, not as much as in other European countries, but we see a little bit similar tendency, and getting out of nuclear energy and things like that, not the right way. So investing heavily in renewables, but that does not pay off immediately and things like that. So that's definitely a challenge. And then, the global supply chain disruptions we have seen during COVID is an ongoing issue now in a more and more bipolar world. No? So, navigating a bipolar world is for companies in Switzerland difficult, and creating some challenges as well now, because you have to decide a little bit, okay, which position do you take? Let's say you are an international company, you are active in China, you're active in the US, and you are in a sector that gets more and more regulated about what you can do, what you're allowed to do and not. So these are difficult decisions for companies. And that has an impact, of course, on the overall Swiss economy. And the last thing I would like to mention is, now we don't know what will happen now in the US, of course, but if we have an increase in tariffs, what is a possibility, then it could hit us as well, especially the pharmaceutical industry. We export, so biggest share of export is pharma for us. So it's the most important export sector, and a lot goes to the US. That's definitely a risk now, but depends on what really happens. We all don't know that yet.
Yeah, it's not just that, it's also their apparent confrontation of the prices of drugs in the US seems to be a hot talking point in politics.
Correct, exactly. And that could lead to regulations and so on. And then the farm industry has to think about what they do about that.
Going back to your comment about energy, do you know how much of Switzerland's energy is produced within Switzerland?
I don't know it exactly, but I think I think we import only during winter times, and we export during summer times.
We export energy?
Yeah, because we produce too much during summertime, which is okay. Every country is exporting, importing the whole time. But on balance, not so much the energy expert, but we still have a high share of hydro, 50% around. We have nuclear, I think 25%, and then the rest. That's from the mix quite okay. But don't forget, we had this at the early point in our discussion. If you have increased population by 20%, obviously they need more electricity as well. We have now all the tech revolution that consumes massive energy as well, and at the same time we don't look so much on the supply side, and that creates a risk in the long run.
Yeah, do you keep up with the different energy trends in terms of sustainability? Which things are being pushed?
I worked 20 years ago in the renewable energy sector, in wind energy. I'm following that a little bit, but it's more a little bit what is possible, technology and so on. So, and not so much what is really now going on in this country. Of course, you read that we would like to invest more in renewables, in wind energy, but I know, in 20 years ago, I helped to build wind farms in Australia, and I realized back there in Australia how difficult it was to build a wind farm in the middle of nowhere, where in 5 kilometers only 4 farmers live. You should think on paper, that's an easy thing to do, to put up 5 wind turbines. Forget it. We got sued the whole time. We got death threats. We got everything. So what I realized back then, that even in a country like Australia, is such a struggle to get wind farms running. How is it then in a country like Switzerland with such a high population density? It's nearly impossible. And that's exactly what we see now. So I'm a believer in wind energy, but I don't believe that Switzerland will get a big wind energy producer. I don't see that because it's just, I mean, people say, oh yeah, it's great, but not in front of my house. And that's it. Yeah. Exactly the same. It's exactly this issue.
Not in front of my house, not in the mountains that I walk.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you could put up a lot on near the Matterhorn, but I mean, not sure if the tourists would like it. So as I came to Switzerland 18 years ago, I came out of the wind energy and I looked first, okay, shall I do something in wind energy in Switzerland? I did 4 weeks of research and I came to the clear conclusion, never ever here. And I still stick to that. We will see a couple of wind turbines, but not on a scale like Denmark. Get it?
I guess it's also easier when you have an ocean too, I suppose. You have some space to put them.
Yeah, but even with Australia, you had space.
Yeah, but Australia is also extremely regulated. And then
and don't forget 99% back then dominated by the coal industry.
Yeah.
And fighting against the coal industry is not so easy.
No, we're not as progressive as what I would like us to be. Well, I have one more question for you, and this is a more generic nature, and it goes back towards a lot of the conversation, which was the workforce and jobs. And I think you'd be a fantastic person to ask this to, and that is, what advice do you give to young professionals looking for a job in Switzerland? I know you said that it's a supply market, so that's great then. But in terms of making people as attractive as possible to their employers, any advice, any wisdom?
Well, I get contacted a lot by let's say, potential expats. What I always say to them, you have to learn the language. That makes it much easier for you. That's the big hurdle for many. Of course, we know there's still many jobs around where you can also get your job when you speak English. That's not an issue, but it makes your life much easier if you can speak the local language, or at least try to learn that as soon as possible. Apart from that, I think what we discussed a little bit earlier as well. So, I mean, I think self-responsibility, take your career in your own hand is important. Learning. Look out for the right skill set, more on the technical side. Soft skills, I think, build and leverage and your network is important. By the way, I'm in the mentoring system of the Zurich AWR, so that's the unemployment office, where I mentor long-term unemployed. And what I always realized, and what they realized, for me it was clear, when you build up your network, but then you're either not using it or you're not leveraging it. And then when you're losing your job, you very often realize that your network was connected to the position that you had in your job. So I can really advise also young people, start already, build up a network and move that also a little bit in a personal space. So not just, okay, I work for company A, you for company B, we had a meeting, we're connected, full stop. Try to build a kind of network within your professional network that gets a personal private network, because that will help you long-term career, definitely. When you change your job or when you're suddenly unemployed or you just want to do something else. So that's an important thing. And then do not look just at the corporate sector. So I think consider self-employment and starting your own business. I see that as the next really big shift, that we see more and more people having their own business, being self-employed. And this offers exciting opportunities. So, I mean, why not create a business that addresses one of the big challenges that we discussed today?
Mm. Well, Michael, thank you. We covered a lot in this. You had something for every question I threw at you. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot as well. All the best.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you did enjoy the episode and you want to support me, it would mean a lot if you could rate the episode and follow the podcast on your favorite platform. It really helps the show grow and reach more people. I'll see you in the next episode.